Marvin was tough. He was personally tough. He was a tough actor in his roles and one of the great voices, speaking and acting voices ever in Hollywood films.
Lee Marvin dominated Hollywood with his tough guy persona and iconic roles in movies like The Dirty Dozen, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and Cat Ballou, which earned him an Academy Award. Fans were devastated when he passed away, but what you might not know is that before he did, he revealed some shocking truths about Hollywood and actors. From the actors he hated to what he really felt about Hollywood, let's explore Lee Marvin's confessions before his death.
Why were you not appreciated before 1966?
I thought I was.
By the time you get actual winning of it, are you sort of numb? You are.
Your name isn't called, and I don't know what that feeling is.
Lee Marvin, last words. Despite his relatively short career, Lee Marvin made a mark on Hollywood, and it remained there even after he left. Once he left, the pace of screens and cameras slowed down. His voice was no longer that of a tough guy, but a soft one. He spoke his last words to his wife, Pamela, saying, "I'm tired, hun. Let's rest a while." His last words weren't exactly grandiose or thunderous. Instead, they carried the weight of a soldier who had fought the war and then went on to become an Oscar winner. In Marvin's last months, he stayed away from the glitz of Hollywood and settled on a quiet life with his wife. It was surprising that the man who once hurled bombs of cinematic menace said before his death that he now wanted only a few good laughs and no regrets. He told his friends that he wanted to run the final race with some dignity. What he wanted was to live out the rest of his days without looking back in bitterness. Marvin's pride in his military service was never for show. He often said that his time as a Marine taught him more than any studio ever could. His awards, like the Purple Heart, were reminders of battles that shaped him. When he spoke of Hollywood, he called it trading time for stories. He also declined an honorary award, saying, "I did what I came to do. I don't need a ceremony to remind me of that." In the quiet ranch where he settled with his wife, his study held only one paragraph, which was his Marine unit standing together in wartime certainty. In those days, he and Pamela sat chatting about old adventures, whether in Hollywood or during combat. But before Lee Marvin eventually passed away, he revealed some shocking truths about Hollywood actors, especially those he had beef with, how he came to hate Hollywood, and how much the wars affected him. One of those actors that Lee Marvin wasn't happy with was Yul Brynner, whom he met on the set of The Dirty Dozen. Conflict with Yul Brynner. Lee Marvin and Yul Brynner were two main figures in Hollywood's golden era, but they were as different as night and day. Marvin was a gruff, battle-hardened Marine-turned-actor, while Brynner was polished and preferred control and elegance. So, when they met on the set of The Dirty Dozen, Brynner became one of the Hollywood actors that Marvin would later reveal shocking truths about. Marvin thought that Brynner's acting style was incredibly artificial. He complained that Brynner was arrogant, self-absorbed, and always trying to steal his scenes. In fact, many other crew members echoed this thought. Brynner was also obsessed with camera angles and lighting, and that made Marvin very upset. He carefully controlled everything to make sure that he appeared in the best possible light. That's probably why Marvin once said, "Brynner doesn't act. He just waits for the light to hit him right." The tension between the two of them was obvious. When Brynner insisted on reshoots and adjustments to his lighting, Marvin actually snapped and called him a peacock in combat boots. So, their disdain for each other grew so intense that when they had to interact directly on set, there was always strained silence, with the director mediating between them. After the movie, Marvin decided that he would never act in another film with Brynner. When a project arose that considered the two of them, Marvin refused immediately. He even said, I'd rather drink battery acid than share a scene with him." Aside from how much Lee Marvin was upset with Brenner, he also had conflicts with other Hollywood stars. One of these is John Wayne, who was everything that Marvin hated about Hollywood. Conflict with John Wayne. When Lee Marvin and John Wayne met in Hollywood, they had a major clash on screen and off-screen. Marvin was a man that had fought wars and even ended up in the hospital for over a year due to his injuries. But John Wayne had a glorified war hero image and never served in the military, leading to ideological differences. Marvin's war service was real. He had faced real conflicts, not just those in movies. So to him, the acting game was almost like reliving all that he went through. But John Wayne had the screen hero profile, even if he never actually served. So, Marvin thought that Wayne was taking advantage of an image of heroism, even if he never went into combat. When they shared a set, like on Donovan's Reef in 1963, Marvin's respect for authenticity always clashed with Wayne's larger-than-life myth. Marvin privately criticized the fact that Wayne never served in the military, yet he portrayed war heroes and soldiers with the same charisma as if he had. The tension was more ideological. Marvin believed in the raw, messy reality of service. He watched friends die, he endured pain, and when he put that into his roles, he believed the audience sensed it. In interviews and anecdotes, Marvin talked about how much he hated the studio hero persona, and Wayne was the prototype of it. He felt like Wayne's political rigidity, conservative posture, and public image worked against the honest grit that Marvin prized. Although their conflict was never too public, insiders knew about how they felt about each other. He once said that Wayne played soldier better than anyone, but couldn't take the mud, blood, or bullets. On screen, Wayne and Marvin seemed like they were friends, but off-screen, Marvin didn't exactly like him. But the next conflict that Lee Marvin had was with another co-star, and this time, it was his problem. Conflict with Burt Lancaster. The working relationship between Lee Marvin and Burt Lancaster during the filming of The Professionals in 1966 revealed a mix of respect, insecurity, and frustration. Marvin was newly elevated to leading man status after his Oscar win, and he found himself sharing the screen with Lancaster, a seasoned star. Insiders say that Marvin felt insecurity acting with a veteran like Lancaster, and that caused a lot of unease. It led to heavy drinking during the filming. In one notorious incident, Marvin was so drunk during an important scene on a giant rock that the assistant director, Tom Shaw, had to intervene. Inside, one of the crew members had said that Shaw had to step in for fear that Lancaster would take Lee Marvin by the ass and throw him off that mountain. Lancaster's approach to filmmaking was precise and disciplined, and different from Marvin's raw and emotionally driven style. On the set of The Professionals, Lancaster expected professionalism, and Marvin's lapses into alcohol-fueled distractions made the seasoned actor irritated. Instead, some crew members say that Lancaster even confronted Marvin during that time, holding him over the edge of a cliff and warning him that if he showed up drunk, he would throw him off. Despite all the friction between them, they had a lot of chemistry as they filmed the show. Clearly, he was moody and fleeing into drink when confronted with the pressure of working opposite Lancaster. Other people that Lee Marvin has had conflicts with are famous stars, like Frank Sinatra and Robert Mitchum. Frank Sinatra and Robert Mitchum. In the mid-1950s, the film Not as a Stranger brought together an interesting cast, including Sinatra, Mitchum, Marvin, and others, under the direction of Stanley Kramer. Behind the scenes, the production team had a reputation for chaos. There was boozing, feuding, and temper flares. One insider revealed that Kramer watched 3 of his leading men leaving a bar at 10 p.m., swinging their fists at each other and falling drunk onto the sidewalk. These men were Sinatra, Mitchum, and Marvin. With Frank Sinatra, Marvin had complicated feelings towards him. Although he respected Sinatra's talent, their relationship was strained, and he had a negative view of the actor in different instances, like on the film Not as a Stranger. As the production of Not as a Stranger was literally called 10 Weeks of Hell, Marvin had mixed feelings with Sinatra. It was probably because Sinatra stood at the center of Hollywood, and Marvin viewed the entire glamorous celebrity world with suspicion. Robert Mitchum was another person that Marvin had problems with. They initially fought during the filming of The Big Red One, but their relationship improved after they worked together again. He and Marvin weren't public enemies, but they had differences in their style and temperament. Mitchum had a reputation for being cool, laid back, and sometimes indifferent, and that clashed with Marvin's intensity. Marvin also believed that actors like Mitchum coasted through roles and didn't have the drive that Marvin himself brought from his wartime experience. Meanwhile, Mitchum didn't hesitate to mock what he saw as other actors' self-seriousness. In fact, once, Mitchum retorted to Marvin saying, "At least I don't scream my lines like I'm still in boot camp." These tensions might not have become a public scandal, but it was still hard for them to work together. In the end, while Marvin delivered memorable on-screen performances, along with Sinatra and Mitchum, there was some off-screen fiction. But all of this was about the feelings that Lee Marvin had for Hollywood. Hatred for Hollywood. Before his death, Lee Marvin also revealed shocking news about Hollywood, especially what he felt about acting and the entire industry. For one, he admitted that acting appealed to him because of his own insecurity. He once said, "One of the things that drove me to become an actor was that I was insecure. I thought laughs and applause would give me the security I was looking for." And that admission fits a tone. He didn't come to Hollywood to bask in glamour, but to fill a gap. But somewhere along the way, the appeal of fame and stardom started to look shallow. He famously said, "Ah, stardom. They put your name on a star on the sidewalk on Hollywood Boulevard, and you walk down and find a pile of dog manure on it. That tells the whole story, baby." Marvin's war service in the Battle of Saipan and his years as a Marine gave him a foundation of authentic pain, fear, and survival that he felt Hollywood too often ignored. When talking about his acting, he once said, "What I was going for was that the guy was trying to feel pain. But he couldn't feel a damned thing. I know about that son from the Pacific." That line reveals a lot about a man who had seen real hell, looking at actors mimicking it, and finding the performance hollow. He didn't like the idea of method acting, but he thought that cinema should reflect real fear and real weakness instead of toughness. So he went for the toughest roles in Hollywood because it allowed him to peel back the tough guy mask and let the scars show. He didn't hate acting, but actually enjoyed it. Instead, he didn't trust the industry, even for himself. He once reflected, "If I have any appeal at all, it's to the fellow who takes out the garbage." He preferred to stay with real workers and everyday people instead of the untouchable poster stars. Although Marvin was a skeptic, he still enjoyed acting. He loved his work, valued the craft, and respected those who brought honesty to it. He also enjoyed using his war experience to bring real weight to his roles, because he believed that the audience could sense authenticity. If there's one thing that kept Lee Marvin going, it was his experience from war. He even once said, "In the movies, you get even, but in life, diplomacy is the best." War and trauma. Lee Marvin enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 1942, while he was still 18, joining a family steeped in military tradition. He became part of I Company, 3rd Battalion, 24th Marines of the 4th Marine Division, and participated in no fewer than 21 amphibious assaults on Japanese-held islands in the Pacific. His most vicious test came during the Battle of Saipan in June 1944, when his company ascended Mount Tapochau and was decimated. Marvin can never forget how, in just 15 minutes, the company was reduced from 247 men to 6. During that assault, he was hit by machine gun fire, which severed his sciatic nerve, and after that, he took a sniper's bullet in the foot. The wounds were severe and required 13 months of treatment in naval hospitals. He was later discharged from the military in July 1945 at the rank of Private First Class. Marvin didn't only carry physical scars, but also psychological ones like PTSD. He once wrote in a letter home saying, "I was hit in my left buttocks, just below the belt line." You may think it's funny to get hit in the can like that. I was pinned down and could not move an inch, and then a sniper started on me. Although combat is what forged Marvin, it also haunted him. His survival left him with guilt, trauma, and authenticity that would one day fuel his screen presence. Instead of seeing Hollywood as a distraction, he brought the trauma into his performances. After the war, Marvin did not immediately pursue acting. He worked as a plumber's assistant at a community theater in upstate New York. Filling in for an actor one day made him interested, and he used his GI Bill benefits to study at the American Theater Wing. By 1950, he had made his film debut and was on his way to becoming a rugged screen icon. The legacy of his service was woven into his persona. Marvin once said that in his films, he wasn't playing tough guys, but he had actually lived the tough life. He carried the scars so the audience could believe the menace, fatigue, and devastation that he was displaying. But the scars were too much for him, and he ended up becoming a drinker even while he tried to move on in his acting career. Post-war drinking. Lee Marvin's post-war life wasn't shadowed by his wartime injuries alone, but also by a drinking habit that became troublesome. He used alcohol to numb all his pain. In a candid 1969 interview, Marvin confessed, saying, "I don't take pledges. I quit drinking every morning, and I start again every evening." He knew he was drinking, and that it wasn't good for him, yet he saw it as part of his identity. He admitted to saying, "Well, on occasions, I have been drunk on set." So what? Just because it happens once in a while, people think it's a pattern. The post-war drinking habit is tied deeply to the psychological trauma that he carried from service in the Battle of Saipan and other brutal engagements. His alcohol use was often tied to anxiety, waiting on set, and the residual unease from combat. But Marvin usually arrived at film productions totally drunk, and there have been stories of him getting behind the wheel after too many drinks, crew members fretting over his condition, and directors quietly accommodating his habits. In the struggle of life, he was a war-scarred veteran turned Hollywood icon who was fighting insecurities, trauma, and the need to control and escape. These affected his marriages and relationships too. Marriages and relationships. Lee Marvin married his first wife, Betty Ebeling, in April 1952. The union produced 4 children, and they lasted until their divorce in January 1967. After that, Marvin entered a long-term cohabitating relationship with Michelle Triol Marvin from about 1964 to 1970. She changed her surname to Marvin despite the fact that they never got married. Their relationship ended in May of 1970, at which point Marvin went on to marry his childhood sweetheart, Pamela Feely, later in 1970. The most public and influential legal moment in Marvin's personal life stemmed from the lawsuit known as Marvin versus Marvin. This was brought by Michelle Triola Marvin after their separation. She claimed that during their 6 years together, they had an oral agreement to share property and earnings as if they were married. The trial that followed in 1979 awarded her about $104,000 for rehabilitation, but not the half share of Marvin's earnings as she wanted. The award was later overturned on appeal in 1981, although the precedent remained important in what became known as palimony law. Despite the rocky marriages in the beginning, Lee Marvin finally ended up with a stable marriage with Pamela Feely. He stayed with her until he eventually passed away. Passing the legendary actor Lee Marvin passed away on August 29, 1987, at the age of 63 in Tucson, Arizona. His death was followed by a period of declining health, including a serious hospitalization in December 1986 due to a lung-related condition called coccidioidomycosis, intestinal ruptures, and respiratory distress. Eventually, he succumbed to a heart attack. Marvin's final resting place is among the nation's honored veterans. He is interred at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, in Section 7A, just below the tomb of the unknown soldier. His gravesite reflects his deep respect for his military service. Although he's known to millions as a screen-tough guy, his headstone emphasizes his identity as a Marine. The marker reads simply, Lee Marvin, PFC, U.S. Marines, marking his service and leaving his Hollywood fame implicit rather than overt. Before his death, Lee Marvin revealed shocking truths about Hollywood, its actors, and the entertainment industry. Whether it's the actors he didn't like, the feelings he had for Hollywood, or the trauma he got after war, he had a lot to confess. What do you think is the most shocking aspect of his confessions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.